What won't you give God? This is a very, very challenging question, I think, for most people. I'm going to start off with a bit of a long story that hopefully will help me gateway this point very well. So, I was in a meeting a little while ago, and one of my mentors brought up a fantastic story about a minister who had gone off into the mission field and was in, I think, Dutch New Guinea. Now, I think he was Dutch himself, and he had given his heart over to helping the people of New Guinea to come to know the Lord. So he's been there for some years at this time in the story. And the main story is called the Pineapple Story. I'm sure you'll be able to find something on YouTube. He has a book published. This was quite some time ago. I don't know if the missionary is still alive, but the story was just uh, it was just humbling, to say the least. So he's in New Guinea at the time, and he's been working with the locals, and fresh fruit is just something that you don't usually get. So he's able to purchase in the mainland these pineapple stalks. Now, the one thing about pineapples is it takes about 3 years for them to develop from the time you plant them to the time the fruit is ripe. So obviously a bit of patience comes into play. But fruits are so hard to find in the jungle. He's been serving, and he just feels like this is something that would be good for him, and maybe even the surrounding community to a degree. But definitely for himself and his family. He really, I guess, misses fruit, and the way the diet is that there's probably not a lot of fiber. It's probably a lot more of a meat, or maybe the vegetables are very, I guess, sour, starchy, or whatever. So to have something like pineapple would be extremely refreshing and delicious. So the people group in the area in the deep in the jungle that he was serving and connecting with, he had built quite a bond with. They had made like a trade area, and his wife was a nurse. So they were connecting with the people, and there was so I think some small breakthroughs in this idea of him sharing Christ with these people. But one thing that was interesting was, like in most tribes or situations or people groups around the world without God, uh, they have a particular thing that they excel at in sin, just like all of us. And theirs was they loved to steal. It wasn't just, something they did, but it was something that they did all the time. It was, for some reason, I don't know the reason, but they just love stealing. Now, there are some tribes, in indigenous areas that they would never steal. They have a high integrity. You could leave your wallet out there. You could leave, all your silverware. But on the flip side, these people are cannibals, right? So, six in one, half dozen in the other. Obviously, hopefully, in one of those camps, you don't look tasty. Anyway, so with this knowledge, the gentleman asked one of the native people to help him to plant these pineapple trees. So, the weeks and months and years go on after the pineapple trees had been planted, and now we're talking into the years, and he starts seeing the fruit start to develop and then sit on the tree, and they're almost getting ripe, and he can't wait to have these pineapples. He's been waiting 3 years for the fruit of his labor, and he's, I think, got hundreds of these bushes. So he just can't wait to have fruit and maybe even share it with some of the people in the community. But as soon as the fruit starts to ripen, every night, just before they're about to ripen, like just maybe a day or two before they're in full bloom, or the fruit fully develops, they're stolen by the people. Or at least so he thinks, and he just gets really angry with them, and he just wants to know why they're stealing from him. He's like, I've given you free medical care, I've given you tools, I have this beautiful trade shop. Why are y'all stealing my pineapples? Well, the people said they weren't doing it, and he fought back with them, and for weeks and months, he did not get one of those pineapples. He got no pineapples because, he was under the impression that people in the community were stealing the pineapples. And he was really, really angry. And so he thought, there's got to be something I can do to barter with these people and make them understand why this is such a wrong thing for him to do. So he said, I'm gonna stop giving them medical care. And he was so angry and frustrated that he couldn't have these pineapples. And again, this is a true story. That in his book, in his in the biography, he said that he allowed people to get sick, even babies to die, because of the principle of these people stealing his pineapples. Awful, like when I heard that part of the story, I was sick to my stomach, but I did feel this quickening in my heart to think about where I might be greedy or I might not be sharing the way I could. So anyway, I digress, but back into the story. So he gets so frustrated with people not listening to him and not connecting with him that he says to the villagers and people, he's like, if you don't stop stealing my pineapples, I'm just going to get rid of these bushes altogether. So finally he finds out that the man who actually planted the pineapples was the man who was stealing the pineapples. And I thought the story was coming to a conclusion here, right? Because the person who does the work, ends up getting to bear the fruit. They have no concept of paying for the labor done, right? So even though he would give them salt or he'd give them metals or precious things that they needed, seeds, they didn't see that as quote unquote payment when it came to the fruit of one's labor that you put into the ground. So this gentleman who planted all of the seeds for the missionary, or the pods or whatever it was for the pineapples, he was under the impression that these were his pineapples. And he was going to fight him tooth and nail and continue to take the pineapples. So inevitably, the owner, the missionary of the pineapples said, forget this, I'm going to uproot them all. If I don't get them, no one will. So he uproots them all, and no one has pineapples. So, obviously he's frustrated with the idea of no pineapples. He hasn't had one. He's waited 3 years, probably close to 4 years now. So he goes to the people and he negotiates with them. He says, look, where I come from, if you pay someone for their labor, you get to keep the pineapples. But instead, he's like, look, I'm going to go one step further and I'm going to give you half the pineapples and I'm going to keep half the pineapples if we plant this vineyard. Okay? So the people agree. Now, again, this whole time he's preaching the gospel and he's sharing with them life and this and that, and he's doing studies. But this time around, he goes out and gets these pods or whatever it is, and we're getting close to the 3-year time frame again. So he's probably around 7 years into this endeavor about getting pineapples, and lo and behold, just as they're about to be ripe again, they start getting stolen. And he is just irate, like he's furious. He's been waiting 7 years for pineapples. And, he's already, his frustration has allowed him to have the blood of children on his hands, supposedly, and have all these sick people on his hands. But now he's really, really angry, and he decides to get a dog. It's this big old German Shepherd. And this big old German Shepherd is eating even way better than the people, and the people that are afraid of him. Now, what's crazy is that because he gets this big old German Shepherd, all the villagers that he had been connecting with and working with and doing ministry with, they all left. And then, sadly, because the kind of the smaller, sicker, mangier dogs started, breeding with the German Shepherd, now you had all these mangy, big, lethargic, crazy dogs running, around the quote-unquote neighborhood or the area of that jungle. So they had to eliminate them and curtail them. So he says, okay, I'm going to get rid of the dog. So he gets rid of the dog. He's still angry because his pineapples are still then getting stolen as the people come back. He also had tried earlier, which I forgot, which was to take the trading post away. And they had left previously again. So here he was, for the second time. He's lost out on all of his pineapples. The people are stealing from him. He has lost his ministry twice to the people he's supposed to be serving over these pineapples. And he gets angry one night and he goes to God. He says, God, these pineapples, like, I want these pineapples. They're mine. Like, I deserve them. I put the work into them, so on and so forth. And he's just sad because now he's lost a lot of his ministry. He's lost the connections, and he's lost the pineapples. Right? He's just lost everything around him. So he basically, says, forget the pineapples. Y'all can have them, whatever. So he goes to this conference, and again, probably this is about 8 years into this whole process. He goes to this conference, and at the conference, they are challenging people to give up everything that they have to the Lord. Give it all to the Lord. And what does that look like? So this really challenges this missionary, and he's like, okay, I got to give this to the Lord, right? Like, okay, I've got to give, these pineapples to the Lord. I got to give the ministry to the Lord. So he goes back and he tells them, look, I've given this. Sorry, I'm not going to argue with you anymore. You can take whatever you want. So he does that, and again, for days and weeks, they just keep on stealing the man's pineapples, right? He's waited now 8 years, probably plus, for pineapples. He's now surrendered everything to God. And again, this is a true story. This was blew my mind that this missionary had allowed people to die over pineapples. He had gotten a German Shepherd, to fight off people for the pineapples. He had shut down the trading posts. He'd lost his ministry all over pineapples. And, here I am sitting on my high horse thinking, oh, I wouldn't do something like that. This is horrible. But I'll get to my story in a second. So inevitably, they go to him, and the villagers come up to him one day and says, they call him, I think it's Tuan. Tuan means foreigner in New Guinea. And they say, Tuan, you're a Christian now. They said, you finally become a Christian. And he said, what? He said, they said, you finally become a Christian. He's like, what are you talking about? He's like, they're like, well, for the longest time you told us about, God loving us, and, he's not angry with us, and he will share with us. But you were not sharing with us. You did not love us properly. You were angry with us when we were stealing from you. And he was like, whoa, what? He's like, that's what you thought? Like, you thought that me being angry with you over my property is something that I should kind of back off from, and that all this time you thought that I wasn't being a good Christian because you were stealing from me? And they're like, yeah, you weren't being loving, you weren't being kind to us while we were, hurting you, taking from you, stealing from you, the things that you talk about Jesus. And he was really taken aback. He was like, oh man, he's like, all this time, here I was, worried about the pineapples, and these people were watching who I was. But, that night they came back and they were still stealing the pineapples. So he goes to God. He's like, okay, they see that I'm a Christian now, and we're 8 years into this thing. Two patches later of strawberry patches, I guess pineapple patches later. He's like, they're still stealing stuff. Anyway, they come back to him, I think the next day or within a couple days again, the people who are stealing these pineapples from him, and they said, we know you're a Christian, but we were wondering, you said something about giving things up to someone. Who did you give it to? And he said, well, when I went away and I went to this conference, I learned, I was reinforced about this idea of giving everything to God. So he said, I gave up with you over the past, I guess, couple weeks or months, and I've given up my right to these pineapples. I've given the pineapples over to God. And, it wasn't probably a crystallizing moment, but they all started freaking out. And they thought to themselves, now we're stealing from God. And so from that day forward, the people of New Guinea and the indigenous people and the missionary and his family and everybody, they ended up sharing these pineapples from then on. So this gentleman who had gone to the mission field for 20 years was willing to, have babies get sick and people get sick, was willing to sick a dog on them, was willing to lose his ministry, was willing to shut down the trade posts, to then realize that he wasn't acting like a Christian, which was a big part of it, and that he wasn't giving things to God. Now, he finishes his testimony by saying that he struggled with giving things to God in his life. And I can only imagine, because I think a lot of us have those things in our lives we just don't want to give to God. And he remembers one night in particular when his son was extremely sick. He had had a fever for some time, and he was praying beside him, and his son, and he felt the same missionary, and he felt this burden that he actually had never given his son over to God. And so in that moment, he started praying, and he released his son to God. He said, God, whatever you want to do in his life, there's no grandchildren in heaven. He's your child. And that night, the fever broke because I think the doctor was days away, and he probably would have died. And all of these principles, all of these stories that this wonderful missionary went through, again, and the main title of the story is called The Pineapple Story, because obviously it was about the pineapples, is that this gentleman was in a constant state of learning that he needed to give things up to God. And there was always something that was hidden, or that was something that was so simple, or that was intrinsic to his life, like his child, his sense of worth, his sense of belonging. The pineapples, even the fresh fruit, was his property. He felt like he had paid for everything. He put the work in. He was helping these people, but he wasn't giving it to God. He wasn't giving every ounce of God the glory. He wasn't allowing it to be a tool for God to use in his life and to love through. And all of that story, or those stories together as a combination of, I guess, his life, and I think he has dozens of other stories, this missionary, but that really hit home for me as a man who's moving into social work or different forms of ministry, more so than I already have. I've been volunteering and doing ministry for over 20 years, life coaching, helping men for 15 to 20 years. And I really had a moment, during this story where I was tearing up, and I was thinking to myself, God, I haven't given my wife and kids to you. And there are times when I want to protect my wife and kids, when I want to protect their emotions, protect their hearts, and do all these things for them, which is absolutely necessary and good for you to do as a husband and a father. But if in that I still haven't given God full control over the situation, I'm holding on to my wife and my children and other things in my life as if I can control them. And I can't. I'm to guard over, to love, to watch, to connect with, to serve, to uplift, to allow them to go deeper and further than myself. But I am not supposed to be the one who holds on to them, and if anything, holds them down from being the person that they can be, especially in their relationship with God. And that really hit home hard, that I really need to take that step back, not to be again, everything else that I listed before, but to allow God to work in the way God needs to work, especially in their own lives, in their own salvation, in their own sanctification process. And it really has become very clear, even in the past, I'd say, week or so for myself, as we're making some bigger changes, life, altering changes, that God will help them to come alongside and give them the same vision as myself. I don't need to do that. I don't need to govern that. I need to do everything that I can to be right with God, be right with them, be right with other people, and try to make the best decisions. But if they feel peace about something, even if it's a hard road ahead or whatever it might be, I need to be open to giving up everything. And I was not doing that, and I was really challenged by that story, and I hope you are too. Because when we, I think, truly start giving up those things in our lives, and God continues to bring forward those hidden sins or those things that we don't really understand that we're holding on to or tethering ourselves down from God's best in our lives, when we come either face to face with it or we relinquish them, even if we don't understand what we're relinquishing, I promise you the peace is unreal. And I hope that for everybody. Yeah. If you'd like to watch any other Dad Doing Dishes episodes, please check out the playlist right here. If you would like to like or comment, that would be amazing. I love getting back to people. Please subscribe right here. I just want to say thank you so much for watching. Have yourself a wonderful day, evening, morning, or night. God bless.